Serpentac stood high above the wobbling miscarriage of oncoming traffic. He was weak in the knees, blackened out of sync, knew his time here would soon end with an internal hemorrhaging, made aware by the animastrosity of his Frankenstatue presence. No longer would he carry on his shoulders the weight of passion, nowhere were his next of kin to be found. Automotive surges spilled through the veins below him. Was this the only passage that he could find? Sweat adorned the unmopped of his brow. He couldn't possibly turn back. His jaws jingled with cold stuttering. His stomach bulged mid-metamorphosis, grumbling nut belches, too nervous to look down into the inviting concrete collision. He served himself no other choice. Between two mountains that claimed some half-assed biblical truth, Serpent knew better, as it had been etch-a-sketch with the branding of a caveat emptor, scarlet with rheumatic shakes. Crashed, beyond mocking belief, this one last hit would spin him and wring him through the mud. He'd always been denied, but this time he didn't want to wait outside while the party raged on without him. The rail that adorned the top of the bridge pulsated a cape of wind shut on looking. Cars drove past in amazement. Who the fuck was that wingnut doing his trapeze act? Thought one commuter as he shot by.
Ama, mira el muchacho va a brincar.
Screamed a 13-year-old girl, trying to flag her parents' attention, racing by in a beat-up truck filled brinkwise with landscape tools. A few miles up the street, the band played on. Springs coiled tightly in the tendons of his legs. They were ready. His tears smoldered into the afternoon air. No one could stop this now. He wandered in flashback stanzas, emitted from this reality. His body took form, half-moon die-cast on a February dive. An emblem for all to see. Unamused compound of fractures, brittly awaiting for the portal to open. Plummeting in the pupil, craving a mute resolve. I'll fucking show them, gathered a light wind past his face, defecating a verse that sang. Yo ya me voy, y nadie me recordará. He smiled from his chandelier vantage point, inaudible to the ribbon mic tenderness of his naked iris hearing device. Waiting for the opportunity, wilting in sin. The cat among the pigeons would now pounce back into the arms of his true family. Slicing of one last breath, sparkling diamonds in headlights, forever stained in the maroon stamps. Serpent had always been a little overly possessed by his chimerical scribblings. Between lunch breaks and during class, maybe even in his sleep, you would find him drawing neo-cultures deceased and grotesque. That was the portal he created, getting dirty in the nails, small hairs yanked, always a canvas moment waiting in the wings. This served its purpose well, as he was malnourished without the outlet. So vividly they spoke to him, committed to its paper. He never noticed if anyone else could hear them too. No matter really, because it's what they said, and how they said it. They were infatuated with each other, from the get of their disturbance. He knocked on doors that everyone else knew had no existence, spiral notebooks lending variety in the medium, Ouija boarded inch by gasp, slow notion in their claps, center psalm lesions of grandeur. Inbred petting with ball of point conceived infatuation, clad in flat ash waiting to be rejected, always waiting to be defective. Un juramento sin forma. Me escape de las montañas, salte veneno. Scalpula failed to release. You could say he was whipped by the argot of his outlet. Serpent taxed, ever the ardent underdog. And of this was born a pig's-tie pavilion of dribbling hieroglyphics. He needed to be needed, longing for scores, unzipped face, deformed expariate. They were meant for each other. They defined one another, and soon they would be one. Wait now, hadn't this all happened before? Traced back in years, recalling the events, there was a venom in numerical tries, an autocrat in waiting, unknown to himself even. He started losing grip. The sang-froid hunchback that was held together by electric ligature was always finding it harder and harder to stay alive, let alone make amends in the eye of his storms. This had happened before. On an opaque afternoon, fending for himself in the wake of a mistake, Serpent was caught on guard in the line of quarreling fire. A closed can of inebriation that found its way between his own crosshairs, striking him in the cranium. A class of migraine unto itself. Maybe he had asked for it. Maybe it was the excuse he needed to traverse the borderlands of clairaudient dwellings. Through aneurysm vespers, in the cabinet were the means. To smithereens of an aching argument, he left the point of impact. Yeah, he left it for Broke to medicate his wounds. Maybe he had made a mistake, but mistakes are what his dreams were made of. Supple and warm came the covers over his body. That handful of morphine his mother left behind when she died sure came in handy. This was the hit that marked the beginning. In and out of reality for 1 week on end, his residency would live in infamy. It was here that they would first make contact with him, the autocrat in waiting, fighting to stay alive. He had been nominated, tagged and placed with the high water flood of twisted necks, banging mainline swan dives, cold gizzard to the easing of his confusion. We had studied his slithering newfangled strut from abroad, true prince among the living dead, a wicker at wit's end, sweltering an oracle of muse, stuck upon inoperable amputecture, whose flesh wounds felt him thud to the ground each time the gang of obstacle contusions buried him zealot deep in stupor. With his armor of broken skin, he had now become a carcass of caricature, immune to the slashing of his right fretted arm, mending a hand-me-down impression dressed in reverent shards. One who had drunk with owls with news in the left hand, showered by lacetations that poured as loud and quick as sand, magnet for the welding knives, with a handless desert of lapwing practicing on his punching bag heart, stacked against the tidal wave of formative groves, making all his advances imperially morose. Bodies can only take so much wear and tear before they collapse. Now the hurdles, they stood in queues, dwarfing one another in size and shape. They seemed to throw themselves at his body, puncturing with cesspools, inseminating the passive-aggressive whiteout that lit his hair on rooted nerve ending. Mala suerte that reduced him to a rumble of incoherent belligerence, so as to not add him to the demons that leached under his socket of ice. People would walk the other way when they saw him hypnotized. His tongue became a cluster of stolen hinges, unable to close sentences. To decipher riddles imbead in mud, hunted by a bulletin of linguistics, playing dead for keeps, and it's sick for all who couldn't see how he could float to the brink with pain by his side, flirting with the insomnia of daft parasites. You could hear him sing in his sleep. Con cada cuerpo que entran es más, este barco se olvidó como a nadar. He had been salvaged almost every other time, but this one would break the foundation that he built from the inside, unconventional and undeniable, a tremulant megaphone calls.
That is until we brim the ballots with the grins of bloodlet nominations, punctual and factual. After all, he created us. What would we be without our beloved bull-legged hex of a leader? An empty throne for the tremulant regime was an unfitting glove left with pistol-grip persuasion. And so our plan unfolded, born of hatchet-faced spindles, a conspiracy that reared its mugshot at the shores of Nedra Keret.
A pinched swerve found at the bottom of a man-made throat that was carved into stalactite teeth, and bandaged with the charm of taffeta webs. To some it was known as the orifice of the underworld, stuffed with loons that held bat serpents' eyes, where endorphins made carnage from an insolent pride. Throughout the years it had become a lair made of murals that drifted out of tar and thin air, belched of lab-coated meat hooks caught on spinal column thorns, found within a planet surrounded by the grave wings of Nervosa, with its moat floating on an axis suspended in time, filled with the remnants of an earthbound portal triangular in scope, were defeated. Serpent lay growing in some tattered pit of stomach, a convalescent home of croaking entrails, mangled by the pettiness of insignificant others. On this black and white planet roared boils upon its shores, nesting bedwetting for our heir to the throne. Many a sun did pass before the house of Tremula Metacarpi was to decide upon a new leader, and who better than the aforementioned neo-infidel known as Serpent Taxed. Probably the loneliest hull of a man that we Tremulans had ever laid eyes on. He resided in the Manacle sect of Mundi, one of many small caves that overlooked the shanty town of Rejuga, engrossed in shadows of curdled blades flashing themselves in the broad daylight piss of kinetic cleansing. With immense fever we handpicked the erratic excerpts from the guilty library of half-truths, a book of suspended impact, how-to manual that taught seduction through the art of suicide, chapterless void of crass ultimatums, liberally adopting the monthly blood of human conversations. It was with the aid of this manual that set the snails into marmoset of momentum. Each page wrapped itself around Serpent, raping its way into his body, for it was by his hand that we were damned to live in motion-sick stills of bone-colored paper. By his ink cult of prods that begot him his only children. Yet the ragman of Mundi knew nothing of his next of kin, the ones he abandoned stationary and underwater flew. So it had begun with a blunt caress of affection from a serfim neuralgia, who summoned him with a warrant towards the canvas of his face, thus administering a morphine carriage of admission. The gates of Thanos were now spread eagle-wide.